Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michael Solomon. I'm the chairman of the SAIMM ESGS committee. And it's an auspicious occasion today where we actually launched the committee after 9 months of pretty hard work on behalf of the team and behalf of on the part of the secretariat and the members of the SAIMM committee, most of whom are with us today. So I'd like to welcome you to the launch and thank you for actually taking the time out to hear what we've got to say, and hopefully there's sufficient interest in your having joined to come and join us in the work that we're doing as the committee and the programs that we're presenting. So I'd like to put up the presentation. Just a bit of housekeeping is that when I'm presenting, I cannot see hands. And so if Camilla or Sam or anybody for that matter, if somebody wants to put up a hand and to chat, just give me a shot, be rude. The format for this afternoon, I'm going to give a couple of slides just to introduce what the ESGS committee is about, why we've put this committee together. Try to take no more than 10 or 15 minutes to do that, and then I would like to introduce the team and get some insights from them, and then just basically have a discussion with you, the attendees. It's very important for us today as the committee to understand what you want. At the end of the day, it's about the membership, it's about our clients, the mining companies, and our other stakeholders. And it's not just for us to tell you what we are doing and why we're doing it, but we also need to hear from you what your perceptions are. If you think that there's any areas that we're not touching on or areas that are redundant, and just give us your opinions. And more importantly, if you have an inclination or would like to join us in what we're doing, please put up your hand as well. So just let me, in starting the presentation, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, I can see it.
With Stephen Ruprecht's course the other day on ESGS, I went halfway through my presentation without realizing that nobody could see it. Okay, so it's the ESGS committee, the Environmental, Social, Governance and Sustainability committee that we have here today. What ESGS is, and there are terms that get knocked around like SDGs and sustainability, and really ESGS has a propensity to become an overused term that actually has very little substance in terms of implementation or impact. But ESGS is fundamentally about how we mine as companies. And the tenets of ESGS are we've been doing for a long time. So none of what goes into the concepts of environment, social sustainability, or governance are new to us. It's just a question of how we approach it and how we look at it through a very, very different lens. So mining is really about the art of extracting non-renewable resources from the ground while protecting the environment and enhancing the lives of all those who depend on mining. Now, this is an aspiration that many mining companies are purporting to have, but it's up to us to actually make sure that they are able to implement it. So the formation of the committee is really the sole objective of ensuring that our professional membership has a clear understanding of the importance of ESGS and is equipped to navigate the increasing complexity of the mining industry. We also seek to inculcate in our members and our members' DNA, our own DNA, a culture of social and environment sustainability. So we as the Institute are traditionally engineers. And engineers, I can say this with, as a mining engineers can be one-dimensional, other engineers can be two-dimensional, but we would like to have rounded multi-dimensional engineers that not only can design mines and plants in a technically efficient way, but also in an environmentally and socially responsible way as well. And coming from an education from a university, we often find that this element is missing in our education, and that as we as a committee hope to bring that across within the Institute. We also not only want to address the Institute's, our own membership, but we also want to broaden the membership beyond the engineering and mining disciplines. So SAIMM has been strictly mining engineers and metallurgists and process plant with a smattering of other disciplines. But it's time, with the complexity of the mining industry, it's really time that we actually change that membership model. Mining is becoming increasingly complex. When I started off as a mine and shift boss 40 years ago in the industry, it was all about stof and gata and production. By the time I became a chief executive, it was 10% stof and gata, and 90% was dealing with the ESGS issues around community politics and various other issues around environment and government. So we do need to change the way that we look at ourselves. We do need to look at mining through a very, very different lens as to what we have done in the past. And we've got to diversify. We've got to bring diversity into the Institute, not only the sort of normal gender and ethnic diversities, but also the discipline diversities as well. And we have to soften what is widely perceived as a chauvinistic culture in mining. We've got to, this is the only way that we are going to be able to change the perception that the world has of us as miners, which is not very complimentary. So what does ESG in mining mean? It's really, the E is environmental impact, and that is about carbon footprint, which is the focus at the moment. We've gone way beyond, the environmental rehabilitation and the Brundtlandian concept of sustainability, and more into the COP26 type environment of climate change, and as one of the most pollutive industries and sectors in the world. A lot of what we can do to contribute to the Paris Accord objectives is to look very, very, very microscopically at what we're doing and how we can reduce our carbon footprint. And most mining companies like Anglo American and others have committed to become carbon neutral by 2040. On the mines themselves, there are more aggressive programs, and some mines are actually targeting for 2035. And technically speaking, it's possible. I mean, one of the biggest problems that we have, again, is culture, which I mentioned earlier on. So looking at environment, there's not, the old sort of the more traditional areas of polluter versus intermediate inputs, the whole question of sustainable mining processes and sustainable supply chain all come into that environmental aspect as well. Water for us is a major focus, as we'll go later on. The social impact is really around sustainable communities. You can't have sustainable environment without sustainable communities, and you can't have sustainable communities without a sustainable economy. And I've often been picked out on public platforms by being a mining evangelist by saying that the closure of mines creates more damage than the opening up of a new mine, because an opening up a new mine, you've got to, is the breaking of the egg to make the omelette. But actually, there's a certain amount of damage that takes place when you open up a mine. But the closure of mine wreaks wholesale social devastation amongst mining independent communities, and they're not always local to the community. And so it's the mine closure aspect of this is very much part of our social impact. It's not just what happens when we open the mine and run the mine, it's what happens after the mine closes we've got to take into account. So the whole question of respect for culture and history and equality of opportunity is important. Governance is important. We have a dearth of governance overall in this country, and within the industry there are questions of governance, which has led to the formation of organizations like the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. So we're not entirely angels when it comes to how we deal with the difficulties of trying to establish mines in emerging environments, particularly in Africa. And it's a difficult one that we as executives have got to be very careful of. So the whole question of governance is very much part of that. And then all of these, the S after ESG is really about sustainability. It's like, if you look after the pennies, the pounds will come. If you look after the ESG, the S will come, that in terms of sustainability. So why it's important in the mining sector? Well, we are up to our gills in policies, in statutes, in regulations, and over and above that, I did an exercise for the World Economic Forum, and we identified no less than 44 voluntary protocols that the mining industry is subjected to. And that is the Equator Principles, GRI, the Responsible Mining Index, the IRMA, Responsible Mining Assurance protocols, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Millennium Development Goals. There are dozens of these things around, all of which overlap fundamentally. But the bottom line is, whether it is a statute or a regulation or these voluntary principles, compliance is not enough. And the voluntary frameworks are at the end of the day, sort of advanced and very onerous box-ticking exercises that we have to subscribe to in order to be seen to be responsible citizens. But it's not enough. We've actually got to, when I talked about inculcating in our DNA this question, as we've done with safety. And I spoke about 40 years ago, Stefan Carter, we used to budget for fatalities. Today, a fatality on our minds is a national incident that gets reported in the, in the front page of newspapers. And we've been able, through our zero harm mentality, to be able to inculcate safety into our DNA. And we've got to do the same with ESGS. And so to survive, it's no longer the correct thing to do. It's the essential thing to do in addressing these things of ethics standards and sustainability of economy. But at the end of the day, there's also the real answer. There's also an expedient aspect to this. Unless we as the mining industry are seen to be responsible and genuinely responsible, we're in trouble, because the world's in trouble and investors have an impact and they've got a clout. We just need to look at, after the Brazilian slimestone failures and a couple of other slimestone failures, that the Church of England, which is not the biggest church on the planet, actually brought in investment principles that to disinvest from mining companies until they cleaned up the Tailings Act. And that that actually rippled through the industry. And so, believe me, investors and investor groupings, activist groupings, can have an impact. And so we do need to be cognizant is that we cannot survive without investors. We cannot survive without civil society. And we've got to demonstrate to civil society and to investors that we are doing the right thing genuinely and not just ticking the compliance boxes. And then it's this whole question of responsibility as well. What is responsible mine, and to whom we are responsible? And I'll deal with that later as well. As I've said, there's nothing new about what goes into ESGS. We've been doing this stuff forever. I mean, we've had the Mine Winds Works Acts of 1967, then there was Brundtland in 1987, and then we had the MDPs and now the SDGs, and in South Africa, like other countries, we've had the MPRDA, which was the first legislation worldwide to bring about social licenses as a prerequisite for mining license. We've had the Mining Charter, there's NEMA, the Water Act, and all of these things. So we're doing a lot of this stuff. It's a question of how we cobble it together and how we present ourselves and how we actually communicate what we're doing to the rest of the world. As miners, we are really, really bad communicators, and we've got to think differently and communicate differently with our stakeholders. Also, I think climate change has been around for a while, but COP26 really did underline the trouble that the planet is in and our contribution as the mining sector to that trouble. And the recent IPCC report was also very, very sobering in terms of where we are in this whole process. And so the whole commitment of the mining sector towards carbon neutrality by 2035, 2040 is an absolutely fundamentally important part of our being able to manage climate change. So as the ESGS committee, and in terms of what we have to do, is that what we aspire to do, our mandate from council and hopefully from your members as well, is that we've got to bring in thought leadership. We've got to, I think that we're ahead of the pack in many ways in the way that we are thinking. If you look at the programs that Anglo-American are doing through Future Smart Mining and the various other imperatives that they've got, we're way ahead of the pack in this country than many of the other mining countries. We've got to build our members' capacity. We've got to provide you with the single point access to information that we can build upon. We've got to catalyze and foster in industry and stakeholder dialogue. We have a work program that I'll present to you shortly. We've got responsible governance that we can really do with with a lot of upgrading and many of the things that we do in the industry. And then what we hope to come out of this, and we're working with the SAIMM Codes Committee, is to come up with an SAIMM code of conduct that if you breach this as members, that you will be persona non grata within our ranks. So that's our mandate, but our job is really to educate you as members by convening relevant and high quality webinars, conferences, workshops. We want to give you available material. There's a hell of a lot of material out there. So the committee is putting together a cache of literature, and we're screening it to put it and make it available on our portal, on the website. We need to offer our members continuous training, professional training, or continuous professional education, as we've done in the other disciplines. And we need training content, which we don't have at the moment. So we're going to borrow a lot of the stuff from the Aussies and Canadians and from the SAIMM. But we need to develop our own material that's relevant to our industry, which is part of our list of things to do. We already have a dedicated ESGS page, website. We've negotiated with the Publications Committee to have a monthly page in the journal, like the President's page. We've also been given by the Publications Committee a dedicated journal every year that we hope that you guys will actually submit papers to. And that's there's a lot of other stuff that we want to do around papers and webinars. The web portal, Sam and the team have done a fabulous job of putting the web portal together, and then we want to recruit new professionals into the industry. So we're going to be knocking on your doors and asking you to get your LED, SED, and environmental professionals to join the Institute. Who are we? The interim chair, Gordon, is responsible for starting this initiative, and he's done put a huge amount of work into it. Mzila has been in his presidential address dealt with the issues that we're dealing. Megan is over Group Infera in terms of SDGs. She's doing a lot of work on SDGs. That is very valuable to us. And the rest of the crew are William Katlejo, Setabili, Marian Manuel, Elias Patendi, Anthony Mello, John Matambu, God knows, Njowa, Mike Rogers, Stephen Ruprecht, Andrew Smith, Andrew Finsell, and Buthli Zakalashi. And we are 17 highly committed and very active members, and we really look forward to your joining our ranks. We've got a pretty impressive website to date, or track record to date. The committee is strong. We've been meeting every 2 weeks and been putting this whole thing together. We're now going over to monthly meetings. We've got a clear program of webinars, publications, and conferences together. And we've got, in fact, our dance card is full for the next 12 months. So we're very happy about that in terms of what we can do. I've spoken about the journal. We're also engaging with other organizations, SAIMM, the SAIMM Codes Committee, ICMM, and other organizations we're in active engagement with at the moment. And then we have had the membership committee and council has approved the recruitment of ESGS professionals as a valid discipline for membership of the SAIMM. And then also importantly is that we've also approved what we'd like to do is to get closer to government and the formulation of policy. And so at the moment we're looking at assisting government with the National Mine Closure Strategy, which incorporates a lot of these aspects of ESGS. So the themes that we're looking at are environment, which are effluents, waste, water, decarbonization of mines, which is multifaceted. It's not only the emission of greenhouse gas emissions from the use of fossil fuel in the mines, but we need to look at changing the sources of fuel, but also changing behavior and other forms of environmental offsets on and around mines. So it's a very wide field. It's not just about changing out of fossil fuels. On the social side, health and safety has always been an issue in this industry and remains a primary focus. But we've also got things like just transition and restorative justice and the whole question of community sustainability that I spoke to earlier on. Governance, you know, we're pretty good on governance in this country, but there's still a lot of lapses if you look at things like Aurora and the Mintails. So there's always these smaller mining companies and less responsible mining companies that actually give the rest of us a bad name. And so governance is unfortunately still very much an issue in the South African and the broader mining sector as well. And then sustainability is about diversified land use around mines, diversification of economy and land use around mine, the whole question of protection and use of biodiversity and ecosystem services, responsible use of those. It's about economic diversification around mines, circular economy, which Gordon is strong on, planning sustainable post-mining economies for dependent communities, all goes into the sustainability drive. So with that, we have a very coherent and well-structured work program in environment, social governance, sustainability. Each one of those subjects have got a champion within the committee who have committed to delivering our one-pages for the journal. Have committed to dates that they're going to produce webinars on and publication dates for the journal paper. So the idea basically is that we introduce a concept through the one page that goes into our monthly journal, that we then follow that up with a webinar on the subject, but that there is a formal journal publication, a peer-reviewed publication that actually addresses the webinars, and then that can go through at a later stage into higher level conferences. So finally, I mean, who are we actually accountable to? Yes, through the code of conduct to our council, but ultimately it's to our affected communities, it's to our workers, it's to our youth, it's to government, to investors. I've spoken about the important investors, to the nation as a whole. But at the end of the day, we must appreciate through this ESGS program, we're not only responsible for what happens on the mine, but for what happens around the mine as well. So with that, I'd like to sort of open the floor and just ask our membership to give a couple of words and words of inspiration and their observations, and then go to the floor generally. So with that, I'd like to start with Gordon. And Gordon, would you like to say a couple of words?
Thanks, Mike. Just sorting out my video there. I think for me, the biggest thing that I'd like to share with the people on the call is really saying that we as professionals need to be informed, we need to be creative, and we have to play an active role in the responsible management of the planet's ecosystems. And that's for future generations. That's not a tick box exercise. And what I would like to try and achieve through this, and with the passion I've put in this over a year now to try and get this initiative to the point where it is, with the fantastic work that you've done and the rest of the committee, is to reach the point where we as an institute, members, and not the institute as a corporate body, but the membership of the institute, influence behavior. Because once you influence behavior of individuals and groups of individuals in a business structure, that's what drives sustainability. That's what drives contribution of the mining and minerals industry to society. But that influencing behavior is dependent on our professional and ethical conduct. Now, core to that then is very similar to the approach that's been taken in safety, is really saying how you think about an issue, a challenge, an opportunity dictates what actions you take, and those actions lead to an outcome. So we as professionals in the minerals industry, wearing and living, breathing an ESGS sustainability hat, can't do tick box. We have to change our thinking. ESG is not a tick box exercise. It's rather making a difference. And in that, taking an approach which has been used very effectively in the safety area is that of what Anglo-American calls being a safety leader. And the first thing on that is to individually is to choose to follow the rules. So basically, as members and as a society of professionals, we need to be cognizant and follow the rules and regulations. So that's not tick box. You need to follow it with passion. So you have to choose to follow the rules. However, when you find something in your line of work, in your social environment, in your private environment, which is not environmentally, socially, governance, sustainable activity, one has to choose to speak up. You have to have a voice. And once you choose to speak up, you have to choose to get involved. It's no good throwing stones at an issue. It's that there's an issue here, there's an opportunity here, I've spoken up about it, now I must get involved and do something about it. So it moves from talking about it to doing it, and doing it in an ethically and responsible way. And whilst you do that, you have to be mindful, choose to be mindful about how you do it. Because many of these aspects in the larger corporations and smaller businesses are sensitive, but if you can steer an oil tanker with a massive turning radius, you can change the direction of a corporate. But be mindful of your engagement in the way such that you can have an effective outcome, and it becomes a positive spiral, which leads to a progressive change, which will take us, I believe, as individuals, as members of the SAIMM, as members of the minerals industry and society, to a point where we actually are living sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Gordon. Mzila, as a former president and having focused on this during your term, can you give us a couple of words, please?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Mike, and welcome and good morning to everyone. Maybe I can start off tongue-in-cheek, Mike, and say I think today, from where I sit, I do not associate myself with that description you gave of the mining engineer. But and I think importantly to kick off my contribution is because when I look at my own tenure in the industry, I think I did fit that definition a couple of years ago. But I think where I am now is that my knowledge and perspective and skills for mining development have broadened as a result of my own self-teaching in terms of navigating this whole area of sustainable development and sustainability. And I think the launch of this platform is really providing a structured, an opportunity for structured development and self-teaching of members. And so it should make for a much quicker knowledge acquisition of members compared to the years and years that I guess some of us have taken to get to the point where we really understand and have integrated ESGS into our day-to-day lives and day-to-day work lives. The other point I think that's important is the timing of the launch of the ESGS. I think we are in an era where I think future economic development is going to be metal intensive. And therefore mining is going to be a huge contributor to that, as we need to respond to opportunities that are being provided by climate change. Yes, there are risks as well. And really that imperative for a just transition to make sure that we continue to provide for the well-being, economic well-being of society. I think I like the way you presented in your presentation, socially in terms of skills and employment opportunities, and more importantly, environmental stewardship. And it's not about a trade-off amongst those three things, but it's all three of them being fulfilled as we develop mines going forward. And interestingly, earlier today, I was listening to a presentation from the ICMM where they speak of the 10 principles of mining for their members. And I think maybe in time we should consider how companies and individuals, in becoming members of SAIMM, need to make a personal and corporate commitment to the SAIMM's ESGS principles as they develop and evolve. The last comment for me is around the fact that I think alongside this increasingly metal-intense future, we're also going to have a need a strong stakeholder engagement. And we're seeing this in terms of how stakeholder capitalism is becoming a feature. And no mine will actually develop without that initial stakeholder engagement. And what we will need to engage on are issues of how the development of the mine will have a positive or a net positive impact on the community where it's located. And this is where these issues of ESG will be coming in. And I think a very good understanding of what they are in specific locations is what will enable a new mine to develop or not. And so I think we've got an opportunity here where previously we would have had to respond to this NIMBY concept. But I think here we've got an opportunity to rather change the agenda and speak about the impact concept of a new mine. And as new age mining engineers, I think that this is a huge opportunity for us. That we've got this climate change and unfolding economic context that's going to provide for that opportunity to manifest and for us to play a big role in that, not only in South Africa, but I think in the rest of the continent. So I think to the rest of the members, I think congratulations for coming this far. But we're really looking forward to engaging with the rest of the SAIMM members on this issue. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed, Mzila. I spoke earlier on about having, of our engaging with other organizations like the ICMM, but also SAIMM codes. We talked about our code, our internal professional code, but that's obviously going to be closely aligned with the national codes, and SAIMM codes are already in quite far down the track in terms of developing an ESG code for the SAIMM codes portfolio. And I'd like to ask Teresa Steele-Schober, who's with us today, who's leading that program for SAIMM codes, just to talk to us about what SAIMM codes are doing in the ESG space.
Hi, Michael. Thanks. Thanks very much for the invite to pop in and chat. So we've constituted an ESG. Well, within SAIMM codes, we have the SAIMM committee, which is responsible for the SAIMM guideline, which provides ESG guidance for the reporting of mineral resources and mineral reserves. The guideline was first launched in 2016 and came out with the 2016 editions of the SAIMM codes. Since then, obviously, the world of sustainability has been moving fast. The world of reporting and disclosure requirements has also continued to evolve. And so in response to that, and in order to equip SAIMM codes for the future, we've constituted an interdisciplinary working group comprised of members from the various SAIMM codes committees to update the ESG guidance that will support the SAIMM codes going forward. So that working group, we've been going sort of since the end of last year. We've fed off the results of the GSSA ESG Inquisition, which was held last year. I'm not sure how many, I know there were a couple of people around this call who attended that Inquisition. And if I may, just because it is in the latest SAIMM newsletter, there's a call for consultation on the sort of mandate and the views that we're trying to address in the ESG update, which is on the SAIMM codes website at the moment. And it would be really important for those who are on this call who clearly have an interest in understanding ESG and advocating for ESG within mining. If you would all go onto the SAIMM codes website and review that consultation document and submit your comments to us, because ultimately, whilst SAIMM codes has SAMMES within SAMCODES has a very narrow mandate. We're supporting clearly the reporting of mineral resources, mineral reserves, declaration of realistic prospects of eventual economic extraction. The themes that feed into that are the entirety of all the ESG themes that are applicable to mining. And so I think there's certainly a desire from SAMME's side to continue to work with this new ESGS committee within the SAIMM. I think there's absolutely space for both of us, together with the GSSA ESG committee, which has also recently been formed. We all have slightly different audiences, but ultimately we're all trying to achieve the same thing. So I think, all of these entities working together is going to only be for the benefit of the mining industry going forward. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to chip in.
Thanks so much to Teresa. And if one is looking at sustainability, at the end of the day, and one of the things that Brundtland said is sustainability is really about future generations and leaving the planet in a good state for our future generations. And within the Institute, we do have the Young Professionals Group, the YPG, and I'm going to ask Katlego and Buhle, who are with us today, to give their views on what we're doing in the ESG committee and how important it is to this group of our cohort of young professionals that are going to be taking over the industry under these regimes. Can Katlego and then Buhle?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. I think Mzila partially covered the importance. I mean, what we quickly realize is the next bunch or batch of engineers is that a bulk of the work lies outside of the mining gate. And I think one of the key things, or engineers who will be deemed successful in the future, will be primarily engineers who have an appreciation of some of the issues that are happening outside of the mine gate, and what type of support are you putting in place in terms of, addressing those concerns. So I think one of the key things for myself as, a person who I deem as the next batch of leaders of the industry is to clearly start understanding how do we effectively communicate with our communities. And the second thing is, what we deem as professionals in terms of impact and value addition, whether those specific indicators speaks to the needs of communities. So I think this committee comes at the right time, because for a bulk of, the work that we've been doing has always been focused on issues inside of the mine gate. But I think what's becoming more important now is how do we address issues outside of the mine gate? And I think, with that in mind, we're hoping to ensure that we attract a significant number of young people into the committee to just try and be part of, people who will be crafting what we would deem as the future of the industry. And I mean, as Mzila highlighted, we need to get grips with, some of the socio-economic indicators that are critical to where we're putting our future mining investments in. And I mean, as future leaders of the different companies, we need to have it, clear in our minds how we are going to address those specific things. So I think I'm certainly excited with the committee and definitely looking forward to the information that we'll be putting out to our members, and just shaping some of our thinking in terms of, viability of the industry in the future. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Katlego. Buhle, your views.
Okay, many thanks, Mike. So on my side, I think as you have pointed out, the committee itself is quite diverse. So we have generations. I mean, you are this generation now that is actually almost being phased out, and I'm part of the generation that's coming in. So we actually have an opportunity now between the generations, that the young generation, we can learn from the older generation how to do things and how not to do things as well, and how to do things better. So that is one point. And again, on the professional development side as well. So just to build onto the diversity on the professional development as well. I mean, there's this golden opportunity now to collaborate with other institutes elsewhere in the world. You have mentioned the SAIMM, you have mentioned the SAIMM, and of course that is not only at one generation level, it's taking the older generation and also bringing in the younger generation. So that is also, I mean, that also adds into this. And yeah, so that's basically it for me. Many thanks.
Thanks so much, Butle. One of the aspects of ESGS, and the one thing that actually touches ESGS across the board, is water. And so we have with us in the audience today Dr. Kim Morton, who's been around mine water for decades. I'm not going to say how many decades, Kim, I don't want to embarrass you, but you're one of the few people that I know that has pretty much actually covered the ground in terms of the mining industry. And I'd like you to give us a comment on how you see the performance of mining companies in terms of their approach to water, the use of water, and the sort of general respect for water, and how we can improve matters through this committee and working in that field. Kim.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, no, I think this is a fantastic initiative, and it actually builds very much on what we've been doing with the SAIMM Tailings Committee and the recent tailings conference that we had in September that was very well attended. The exciting part about water is that modern monitoring techniques are enabling us to manage catchments much more effectively. You know, it's now very possible to have 1,000 monitoring probes giving us the height of water in the dams around open pits, the water pressures underground, the state of the rivers. And that's not just the chemistry, but also the height, and reduce the risk from flooding and impact. So we're actually getting to a very important stage in the world where our desire to manage better is being met by technology, with the ability to manage in real time and also have complete transparency as to how water is managed on a mine. Now, that might seem very scary to people who are used to a little bit of mining secrecy, where you don't want the public too much involved, because mining is a complex industry, and it's very easy for lay people to get the wrong impression of what's being done. But I do think transparency and properly managed data and monitoring is the way to go. And the way we've been working this with our clients has been carrot rather than stick. We're saying, okay, so there are penalties for you not adhering to the some 44 protocols around the world. And of course, the South African standards are very high, but there's also a carrot. If you manage your water as well as your bank balance, then there's a definite benefit to the bottom line in your profitability. There's improvement in productivity. And I always emphasize protecting the mine from the environment, as well as protecting the environment from the mine. Because if you reduce water usage on a mine, and you reduce the length of time water comes into contact with an ore body, you therefore reduce pollution, you reduce water treatment costs, you reduce corrosion on your mining equipment. It really is a win-win for everyone to manage water better. So I think, Michael, that supports what you've been talking about this morning.
Much indeed, Kim, appreciate it. One last person I'm going to pick on, I've got two actually, but part of what we're doing is collaborative, and we can't do this as an industry on our own. We can't do it as individuals, and government has a certain amount of capacity, but has its own institutional constraints as well. And so our collaboration with the state and with the agents and capacity within the state is important. And we have in our committee Elias Matindi, who is with Mintech and has provided a lot of resource from Mintech to assist in this, and will hopefully do so in the past. And Elias, if you can have a couple of words, and then I'd like to throw the floor open. Elias.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good afternoon, colleagues. To me, it's a pleasure to be part of this committee. because it really talks to what we all are passionate about. Climate change is here, and there's no way we can walk away from that. We're going to have to take responsibility, and we're going to have to be very much active in playing our part. I am a pyrometallurgist, and we all know that most of the metals that we extract via that route, we have a significant impact on the environment in terms of CO2 emissions. And being part of this committee really puts out that emphasis to say, what is it, what sort of process do we need as a researcher and as a pyrometallurgist? What sort of process do we need to be thinking about that will have minimum impact in terms of CO2 emissions? Because we know that metal production is carbon intensive. And also, how do we link back to the type of building competencies that we need to sustain this initiative? Because it's not just us here, we are also looking at even extending it down to understanding the curriculum design in engineering, the kind of research, the money that we put in research, the kind of leadership that we provide in research. And I'm very happy to be part of this committee, and I really encourage people. It's really rewarding sometimes to be discussing some of these things, because you get the feeling that I'm actually playing a part, I'm actually contributing, and I will continue to be part of this committee in the best way I can. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being part of this initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Elias. And I'm just going to actually ask one person to give a few words, because a very enthusiastic response to what we're doing, and that's Simone Naka. And Simone, it's good to have you with us, and we will welcome you into our ranks, but why would you like to join us?
Hi, Michael. I was not prepared to join the conversation, but it's fine. I'm emotionally prepared, so that's great. I find it really exciting that we're talking about ESG and sustainability, because as a process engineer myself, it's so close to my heart, and I want us to mine sustainably and, really include the SAIMM YPC, because as a council member there, I see, we've just got this wealth of excitement, and, we're new to the industry, and we're really just, as everyone recommends, we should be sponges, and we're excited and ready to absorb all of this information and really just go implement it. So generational sustainability is very important to me. And I think everyone wants to leave a legacy. We all want to retire from the mining industry having left our mark, be it a plant or, a silo or something that you built or left behind. But, more than a physical structure, leaving behind some of your knowledge with a young professional that's going to develop that and then impart it onto someone else means that you'll live forever. So just some thoughts from my side. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Simone, and don't feel victimized. We really appreciate your input, because that's really what it's about at the end of the day. I think that you've hit the nail on the head. Who else from the floor would like to chip in? We've got a number of other committee members, but I don't want the committee to dominate this today. But from the floor, from those who aren't in the committee or not necessarily members of the Institute, would anybody else like to make a contribution? No.
Roy Irvine has raised his hand.
I didn't see. Okay, sorry about that, Roy.
Hi, Michael. No, this is actually very exciting. I think I've been in the mining industry similar age to you, and I've been involved in other initiatives trying to get collaboration of knowledge sharing across mining. I ran the Open Group Exploration and Mining Forum for a couple of years. Just a comment, one of the challenges we had with that, which I hope you won't have, was to get the mining companies themselves to buy into it. Because, the feedback I used to get was that, look, we've got so many things to do, we actually can't do this one as well. I approached the Minerals Council, and it was a bit disappointing in that I thought there's 70 companies there that surely all want to work on the same thing. But it was very negative feedback. What do you doing to try and get the mining companies involved, because that's really critical. It's nice to have the frameworks. If you look at the Australian mining group as well, they've got a lot of good frameworks, but they also don't have too many actual mining companies as part of that, because they're the ones who are going to make the change. We can create the framework, but if people don't adopt it, it's just another framework.
Within the Institute, we do have a strategy to engage more with our corporate partners, because if one looks at the evolution of the Institute, it was primarily corporate, and with the contraction in the South African industry, we now our membership tends to be more non-corporate than corporate. And so to answer that question, we do have an aggressive campaign to engage with our corporates. But again, it's the question that I asked early on, is that what are the corporate wants and what services can we provide the industry? So that is part of what this committee is mandated to do. But we are very much engaging with corporates on how we can, in fact, provide assistance to their professionals in inculcating this DNA into this ESGS into our DNA. So I think your points are very, very well taken, Roy. Thank you very much.
And then just the last point, the other thing I'm involved with now is looking at software technology globally. And there are a lot of companies I come across that are in the ESG field. Would you want them to also be part of your committee? Because as Teresa said, there is a lot of technology out there now that can assist in monitoring and things, which I think a lot of people are just not aware of.
Yeah, I think it's not only the monitoring technology, Roy, but Kim also mentioned the use of technology. And so in just looking at the conundrum of what do we do, it's a broad range of things that we do, and technology is very much part of it. But it's also part, probably the biggest problem that we have is culture, and culture within the industry and without, and also our behavior is important. So we, as engineers, we must be just cautious about not relying totally on technology, and to consider the behavioral aspects as well. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to go to the Tungela Coal Summit, and if the mining industry is seen as a somewhat suspect industry, the coal mining industry, I think, has got more of a problem in terms of the greenhouse gas initiatives. And I was incredibly impressed at the caliber of ESG professionals, environmental professionals, and what they had to say. And I see we've got Nikki Fisher with us today from Tungela. And first of all, I'd like to welcome, I'm very pleased that you're with us, but a perspective from the coal mining industry, maybe you can give us a couple of words.
Sure, thanks, Mike. Yeah, certainly ESG has become a major work stream for us. It's something that I think, having been recently listed, although we were previously listed, under the Anglo-American umbrella, being kind of independently listed now, shines a much bigger spotlight on what we're doing. I think everybody will have seen that we've had a lot of press coverage, not necessarily positive, in recent months as well. And so there's definitely a big uptake in the business, a big turnaround in terms of senior levels of management's approach to ESG, and their perspective on ESG, and their realization that ESG is actually something that's very important. So it's a constant battle to try and it's sort of swimming upstream all the time, trying to motivate to do these things. But the value, we really are starting to strongly see the value, and it's not something that can be avoided. I think finally we're starting to get to a point where even non-ESG professionals in the business are coming to us with solutions and with ideas, which is really encouraging. And so I'm very pleased to see that this committee's been set up. I think the ESG space, even if you are an ESG professional, is overwhelming. There's just such an overwhelming number of standards and guidelines and ratings agencies, and it's overwhelming. And so, if this can provide a little bit of clarity on what people need to do and what is actually relevant in the mining industry, that will be hugely useful. So well done, and I look forward to being involved further.
Thanks. Before you go, I'm going to ask you a direct question. I was impressed with your team and your ideas and what you're doing. The fact is that they're not members of the Institute, and these are the people that we want to bring into our ranks. So how do we, approaching you as a corporate, how do we get you involved, you personally, and to get your team involved? Because these are the people that we want to to bring into our ranks. They would traditionally have not have been part of the SAIMM, and I'm sure that they are members of their own professional community, but we want your teams in here, and perhaps you can talk to us about how we go about recruiting them into the SAIMM and particularly into this committee.
Good question. I think perhaps let's have an offline discussion. I think, because we kind of knew, we're still finding our feet, and we're very open to discussions. I certainly would be, interested in being involved, and hopefully get some of the other team members involved as well. I would have to go and have a look at that. I'm not entirely sure why we haven't been involved to date, and why we're not members, but let's certainly have a discussion.
Well, let's kick that up with you, and also Simone, Nika, and the Xara team. What can you as corporates bring to the table? And again, what do you want from us? We're a committee where we really are well organized. We're incredibly active, but at the end of the day, it's the mining companies that have got to dictate to us where they want the emphasis and how we can serve the mining companies. So this is a very important discussion, and I will pick it up with you offline.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Mzila, you're with us and you're part of the family, but I'm going to ask you the same question.
It's never been an issue. I think for me, what I've found, having come from a metalliferous background, is that coal mining industry has maybe the equivalent of SAIMM, or at least have SAGMA as a body to rely on for these things. And interestingly, my EXCO member Mongezi Veti is on their equivalent ESG body. And so I think it's perhaps at that level, just having an alignment. But from a company perspective, I don't think there's any issue at all. I think what is of advantage to SAIMM is that where you have senior executives participating, it does make it easy for the company to participate, because I think it does require a level of decision making in the organization to be able to make these relationships happen.
Indeed. Okay, we've got we're out of time. We've got 2 minutes left, and I'm going to wind it up. I would really like to thank all of you for coming, and all of you. The fact that you had the interest to join the session today, I'd appreciate it if you would contact our secretariat through Sam, Camilla, and others, or just write to me directly, and join the imperative. If you're not part of the Institute, please join the Institute. But in closing, apart from thanking you for attending, we appreciate that your time is short and there are competitive events all the time, but I really want to thank specifically Gordon, Sam Muller, Camila, Gugu, and the team who have been responsible for pulling this imperative together. And it has been a huge amount of work, and they've done that with equanimity, and we wouldn't be here today without it. So Sam, thank you and your team. We really do appreciate it. And for putting, Camilla, for putting this presentation, this session together today. And again, all of you for coming. So with that, I'd like to close up the proceedings and wish you all the good rest of the week and rest of the day. And thanks again. Bye.
Thanks, Mike. Cheers all.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Just
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Mark. Good one.
Cheers, Richard. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Mike. Good job. Good team.